So I finished listening to the podcast by Intelligence Squared on Is Islam a Religion of Peace? And at the beginning I would say, yeah, I mean, the vast majority of Muslims are, indeed peaceful. It's just an issue of extremists versus moderates. And towards the end, though, I actually changed my mind. This is one of the few debates that I've listened to where I actually changed my mind. And the reason why I changed my mind was because the people that were arguing against the motion that Islam is a religion of peace, they made a great argument and said, well, look at the founder. Look what the founder of the religion said and did. When you look at it, and they said that he led 65, wars and won all of them. Then, I mean, if you're the leader of your faith, is a strong advocate of violence and of war, then it would seem that thus the religion itself would be non-peaceful and violent itself. And so, of course, me being a Christian, I have to compare that to my own faith. And, if I looked at Christ and I looked at Jesus, then, he's certainly a leader of peace. I mean, his whole message was on peace. But at the same time, the Christian faith, is built on the Jewish faith. And, of course, if you look at the Jewish, you look at the Old Testament of the Bible, God was, comes across as a very cruel God. I mean, he told his people, the Israelites, to slaughter men, women, and children of other nations. So you can't really get away from that. Of course, I would, argue from a theological standpoint the justification for that. Just as I probably could argue the same thing for the Muslim faith, because after all, I mean, Muslims would say that we all worship, Muslims, Jews, and Christians are all essentially worshiping the same God. I think some would, some others certainly wouldn't. But anyways, they did make the argument that, what should be done, that Islam can be a religion of peace, is by simply, contextualizing the text, by looking at the text in a way that says, hey, don't take it as such a fundamental view of what's being said. Of course, the counter arguments were, you can't do that. That's not how you read the text. And then, of course, you get into the argument, well, that's what some people say, that's not what other people say. They didn't touch on it. They probably could have used some other examples. I thought some good examples where they said, well, the Muslim faith is kind of at the point where Christianity was when the KKK was around. Because the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, were, based on supposedly Christian principles and extended the Christian faith, yet were supposedly Christians, yet they committed horrible crimes against African Americans or blacks. At the same time, going back to the counter argument, an example they didn't use would be like Nazism. You wouldn't know. Vast majority of people would say, Nazism is violent. It's a non. No one would say Nazism is an ideology of peace. No, everyone would say no. It's a violence of hatred and bigotry. They didn't use that, and you would easily look to the founder of that ideology, Hitler, and say, yeah, he was a bad guy and he hated people. Thus, it's an ideology of hate, and that's what the group that was arguing against the motion was saying, was that if you look at the founder of Islam, you look at Muhammad. The fact that he led 65 wars, campaigns of war, would indicate that he was a violent individual, regardless of his reasons. And so those who follow his teachings would thus follow those same teachings that he had on leading those additional campaigns in jihadist wars against those who would stand against Islam, and also those who would convert from Islam. one thing that I did think was interesting, and it, I thought the Iraq wars and I think American involvement in the Middle East has been absolutely terrible. Vast majority of this political ideology, and in my opinion, is driven by that. They view it as a threat, and so it has allowed these extremists to hijack this religion to bring about even greater violence against people. And I said it from the beginning, the way to win the war on terror is not to commit greater acts of violence. Because all we've seen is the more we try to we blow people up with our drones and we invade their lands, the more it kind of reinforces their idea that it's Islam versus the rest of the world, or Islam versus the West. And it is. I mean, they do view it as the rest of the world. They're against colonialism, against it just kind of reinforces that the ideology that's already there. Because I know a lot of people would argue, or at least the counter arguing would say that Islam is a mixture of political belief, law, and and teachings and scriptural teachings. And the only best part about it is the people who are good, who bring out the best of what they can from the scriptures. And like I was saying, if I was in charge, I would have pushed for secularizing the faith, and that's essentially what the people that were arguing for the moderate view of Muslim was essentially for secularizing the religion. I mean, that's essentially what happened to Christianity in a lot of ways. And I don't necessarily view that as a bad thing in some ways. And what I mean is, like, there was an old saying about how when Christianity was first formed, it was nationalized under Constantine, it was secularized in Europe, and it was monetized here in America. But in some ways, it wasn't necessarily, I think, a bad thing. By breaking down from the fundamentalist views. And I think that's probably the danger, is people taking such strong fundamentalist views and twisting it in a way that it can actually be counter to what the scriptures are. And specifically in my case, I can't speak to Islam, but I can speak to Christianity. I know there's verses when I think people could take to an extreme in the Christian faith and a fundamentalist view, and it logically would promote violence and promote wrong thinking. But I think at the core of Christianity and Jesus' message was that you love thy neighbor as thyself. So, I mean, that's all I can think of. It was a really great debate, and I encourage you to listen to it to really kind of get an idea and understanding of what's going on in our world. So, thanks for listening.